Hello and welcome to this webinar with Evolphin Software. My name is Brian Ahearn and I am the COO with Evolphin Software. I am joined by Rahul Bhargava, CTO at Evolphin Software, and today we will share with you how creative organizations are deploying next generation workflow technology to address strategic, operational and commercial challenges. Secondly, we will discuss why industry trends are having a massive impact on the asset to market process, including the mechanisms that creatives and key stakeholders will need to employ in order to enhance collaboration and productivity. Our agenda will commence with a discussion about the types of issues that continue to frustrate and inhibit the productivity and in some cases the credibility of creative organizations. We will then share with you a number of trends that are developing within the industry and how these are likely to impact creative organizations going forward. This will then be followed by a brief review of traditional approaches to digital asset management and a comparison with next generation innovations that will significantly change the game. Questions will be addressed at the end of the discussion. If you have a question, please submit your question through the text interface. There is no doubt that technology is reshaping the creative process. The complexity of digital workflows is increasing dramatically. More stakeholders, both internal and external, are engaged with the creative process. Competition is fierce and speed to market is critical. Demand is increasing. However, commercial realities are leading to a dramatic reduction in resources, both human and technological. This is great if you are a resource in short supply and high demand. However, not so great if you are a creative agency working hard to secure your customers and to protect your revenues. On the subject of revenues and profitability, margins are shrinking. Competitive forces, process inefficiency, the poor use of technology, and an engine that is based on manual procedure are all driving up the cost of asset production. If creative agencies are going to protect their commercial sustainability, they must learn how to better serve their customers, and to do that, they will need to leverage next generation technologies in order to streamline and innovate their creative process. There is no doubt that creative organizations are already facing multi-dimensional challenges and issues. What is becoming even clearer is that these organizations will need to accommodate the dramatic changes that lie ahead if they are to survive. The whole digital universe is expanding in every respect. There are bigger assets in the mix and more of them, more stakeholders, and of course, much greater complexity. The technological foundation upon which these companies are currently built is unlikely to deliver the capability and the outcomes that are being dictated by an increasingly demanding customer base. The question that needs to be answered is whether or not next generation technologies can meet the challenge. The answer, of course, is that they have to.
Thank you, Brian. This is Rahul Bhargava, and I'll be leading you through the technology side of this webinar. To start with, let's take a look at the DAM industry timeline. Now, in the early days, it was all about printing and proofing, circulating hand-marked documents all around the office. Needless to say, this was not a very efficient way of sharing and disseminating information. So in the early 90s, 1993 to be precise, Adobe came up with a format called PDF. With this format, creative organization could finally take their digital assets, images, files, and convert them into a format that could be widely disseminated. Anybody who had access to an Acrobat reader could open up and view the digital asset. Right around this time, there was another technology that started taking hold, and that was network file shares. The network file shares allowed creative teams to load up all their files into a shared folder and provide central access to all the stakeholders. Now, this was a huge improvement over what existed before, which was paper workflow, but this was not enough because with network shares came the issues of ad hoc security. Anybody could go and overwrite files, versions could be deleted, and a slew of issues arose around network file shares. To address some of these issues, in the 2000s, traditional digital asset management debuted. Now, initially, traditional dams were focused at solving one problem, which was if you had a huge image library, how do you import, search, and have a central way of managing images and rights associated with them? Now, these traditional dam solutions did not provide you with workflow, visual markups. If you wanted any of these functionalities, then you had to go and integrate with third-party solution. So now if we look in the future, the next generation DAM, they're all about automating the entire creative process from production to consumption of digital asset. Unlike traditional DAM that required implementing a stack of disparate solutions, with the integration burden falling on the customer, the next generation solution will be integrated. So you would have DAM, workflow, quality versioning, visual markup, all in one solution. The next generation DAM solutions are essentially taking a more holistic approach to DAM. They recognize the needs of various stakeholders, be it art directors, marketing, partners, account managers, and external end clients. The idea is to bring everybody under one umbrella. So with that, let's move forward. So next, what we are going to do is take a look at how next generation DAM address the key challenges in a modern creative workflow. So the first thing that we'll consider is how next gen DAM can improve the efficiency of creative team members. Now before we do that, let's consider how traditional DAM have worked. With the traditional DAM, the idea is to finish creating digital assets and then upload them to a central repository for retrieval and searching. While the asset is getting created, produced, there isn't much support that a traditional DAM provides. The idea was to circulate work in progress, all the iterations via email, shared drives, in essentially a out-of-band form. And once the assets were finalized, then they get published into the DAM repository. In contrast, the next generation DAM are about tracking changes continuously. All the work in progress steps are captured in the asset management store, which is versioning enabled, and that allows you to preserve important iterations, milestones that occur during the creative asset production in the repository. In order to facilitate that, the modern next generation DAMs provide plugins that integrate directly with the creative application like Adobe CS that creative teams use. They also integrate very well with operating system desktop applications like Mac OS Finder or Windows Explorer. So with the next-gen DAM, staff can work from within their app, avoiding painful multi-step uploads that are common with traditional DAM. Specialized digital librarians are not needed to upload. The access is very simple. Anybody can just click on a file inside an app and the file is saved and versioned. Open access to the entire organization is still provided, but you can keep tab on published assets by automatically marking them as published. So you not only get the version history, but you still get the published reference assets in the asset management store. To make these points clear, what I'm going to do next is actually give you a demo of how a next generation DAM like Evolphin Zoom operates and how it improves your working efficiency. So with that, I'm going to switch track. Just give me a second here. Next generation DAM like Evolphin Zoom provide number of plugins into creative applications like Adobe Photoshop that allow you to work with documents directly from the Creative app without switching context. For instance, if I need to check in a document, I can just click a button and have the changes be automatically saved in the asset management store. Zoom even provides productivity plugins into Microsoft Office that allow non-creative people in the organization to work with formats such as Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. Creatives find plugins into Mac OS Finder extremely useful as it allows them to work in a batch mode where they can make changes to a document in the Creative application, go back to Finder, see a breadcrumb trail for the changes, and quickly locate the specific files that have been modified as part of a Creative project. They no longer have to go through the entire set of files to figure out the changes and manually upload the data. Similar to the plugin for Mac Finder, the Window Explorer plugins let you achieve the same goal, which is to be able to work with the asset from the desktop file system. So for instance, to figure out if a document is versioned and exists on the asset management store, you can look at the icon. If it's green, that means the document is versioned. You can use the context menu that are built in into Windows Explorer to be able to do the asset management and workflow functions directly from Explorer. With solutions such as Zoom, there is no longer any need to email proofs of structured documents like PDF, Photoshop, Illustrator, etc. You can now simply generate high resolution previews and see that right from within the Visual Asset Browser. These are just few of the ways in which next generation asset management solutions allow you to work more efficiently. If we look at the modern creative projects, they cover multiple stakeholders from creative designers to marketing department, account managers, software developers, webmaster, external partners, and end clients. So it's no wonder that today creative project costs are escalating. The complexity keeps on rising. Now, if we look at how traditional DAM operate, they do not really help you much with coordinating jobs. They do not capture the asset creation phase. So with a traditional DAM, what you will end up is a lot of manual coordination to get the creative job done. Operations and project management staff would still be running around trying to get tasks moving, routing tasks to the next stakeholder, and all this causes excessive repetition as mistakes are made. And in order to determine what is the right version of an asset, you still end up spending a lot of time calling around in the organization. And the worst thing that can happen with a traditional DAM is wrong version can get sent to the wrong end client because the system itself has no way of tracking jobs. In contrast, the next generation DAM, they are all about automating the task routing that needs to happen in a creative job. They eliminate manual coordination that is so common in a traditional DAM. There's no need to move physical job jackets across stakeholders. It's pretty easy to deliver the right version to the end client using the next-gen DAM because they will track assets and their versions as they get finished. On job completion, you can automatically publish assets into the asset repository. Costly reruns of artwork are avoided because the next-gen DAM is tracking the jobs as well as the assets. So with that, we are going to switch into a demo to see how next-gen DAM addresses these issues that we have outlined. Next generation workflow solutions such as Zoom provide a visual designer that allows you to model the business processes that exist in a creative workflow and essentially map them graphically into tasks and reviews. For instance, you could specify a client brief task that requires the account manager to enter the client brief and then have a review performed by anybody who needs to approve the brief. The actual routing is completely automated. Zoom will transfer the brief to all the users who are in this particular review, and if they reject, if they do not approve, Zoom can automatically route back to the client brief task where the account manager may have to fix it. So there is no need for a physical job jacket to be moved between various task holders as the workflow progresses. If the account manager wants to change the workflow routing, he can simply drag and drop a task node and specify the name of the task. Let us say the task is a change the client logo. That can now be inserted into the existing workflow by just changing the lines that flow into a task. So we can have the account services review, once it is finished, flow into the client logo PSD task and then reroute from the logo PSD task to assemble client portfolio. So as you can see, just by drawing lines, by changing the lines, we can change the workflow routing and have the task go to the next person in line. Once a task is finished, for example, the Coca-Cola task is over, Zoom can automatically mark the assets as published by putting those green icons. If you mouse over the green icons, it can show you the version which was published. So this is a great technique for finishing a job and getting the right asset versions published and be available to the account manager to pass them on to the end client. And this completely removes the confusion that arises in creative workflow where nobody is sure what is the actual version that has been published. Now we look at how to accelerate the time to market for creative projects. Now, in the traditional workflow, setting up a job is a lengthy process because it requires various stakeholders to be lined up, multiple meetings to be set up in order to figure out who is doing what. Further, resource assignment is problematic as there's no easy way of figuring out in real time who is working on what task at the moment. Project management has a hard time manually tracking schedules and progress because there is no automatic way of updating the project status as the tasks are completed. Finally, bottlenecks can crop up late in the project execution cycle, causing delays. Now, in contrast, next generation workflow technologies can reduce project setup time via automated workflows with the ability to save them as job templates that can be reused when a new job shows up in the system. They can enhance resource utilization by providing real-time project dashboards that can show resource bottlenecks, resource availability. They can further enhance collaboration between stakeholders by generating alerts. They can help stakeholders find the right version of assets that are being created within a job boundary. They can assist with automatically routing assets across various stakeholders, and this is really important when you cross departmental boundaries. So if a set of assets need to move from a creative department to perhaps marketing, then the new generation workflow technologies can help with asset routing. Finally, they can help identify project issues early on via job progress trackers that can report the jobs that are running behind schedule via automatic notifications whenever a workflow or job stalls. You can set up escalation rules if a job does not complete or a task does not complete within a time period, then next level in management can be informed. They can help with fostering teamwork by allowing team members to visually comment on the creative projects that are getting done. So now what I'm going to do is go through a demo clip to show you how the next generation workflow technologies are working out. So next what we are going to do is look at some demos to see how next generation workflow technologies are helping. Zoom has a template library management system that allows you to take any job, preserve some of the parameters, save them as a template in the template library. And once a job has been saved in as a template, it can be instantiated very quickly whenever a new project or a job has to be started. So for example, the subway ad template can be instantiated, and we can go and change the metadata associated with the job for the specific due dates, durations, etc., and quickly start the job without having to sketch the entire workflow, without setting up meetings to figure out what are the set of tasks that needs to be done. Everything can be completely automated. Systems like Evolphin Zoom allow you to do automatic asset routing. So for instance, for the very first task in this job, if we wanted to select the latest version of these assets from the repository, we can just drag and drop and have the task automatically be assigned those assets. The designer who needs to work on this task will automatically have the locks on these files and would be able to see them in their task manager. Now, beyond just assigning assets to a particular task from the repository, Zoom allows you to specify dynamic rules. So for a review task, we may not know what assets will get created that needs to be approved. So we can set up a pattern like asset from previous task, and Zoom will be responsible for routing the assets that are instantiated, are generated in a previous step, and be assigned automatically to the next step. For another assignment, we might want to specify a pattern. For example, we might want to say take all the Photoshop files and assign them into this particular task. Now there might be situations where there may be spec'd out digital assets. There might be a predefined layout for an InDesign doc that we may want to assign to a task, and Zoom supports template database from which you can pick the spec'd out version of templates and assign them into a task. Once a job has been started, Zoom will notify the participants automatically whenever tasks are ready to be started by them. So for instance, if there was an assignment for a designer, they would see an email like this which will tell them the name of the job and the particular task that they need to work on. Next generation workflow solutions like Evolphin Zoom support a task manager interface which allows a creative designer to browse the specific tasks that are assigned to them as part of a creative job. This gives them a dashboard from which they can see the upcoming tasks that they have not yet started. It allows them to browse the specific assets that are assigned to a task. When the designer is ready to start working on a particular task, they can sign in by accepting the selected task, and the act of signing in will automatically check out the right versions of the asset, route the versions into the desktop for the creative designer, and lock the files. So all these activities happen behind the screen to present the designer with the specific files that they need to work on. Now once the designer is finished working on a file or all the assets assigned to a task, they can sign off. Before they sign off, they can even look at the tasks visually, they can preview them and make changes using the asset versioning interface that the modern solutions, workflow solutions provide. When they are done with the task, they can click on Submit Selected Task, which presents them with an interface from which they can choose the specific versions that they have created, or they can specify any comments that the approvers need to look at when approving or reviewing the assets. Project managers have access to a web-based dashboard from which they can click on a particular job and track the progress of the job over time. They can use a time slider, for example, to zero on to a particular time period and see what tasks have been finished, what tasks are delayed. They can superimpose the expected completion dates of tasks onto the actual progress of the task and see how the task is faring, how the entire job is faring compared to the projected completion date. And if they want to drill down, they can click on a specific task node, get to see the details on who's finished the task and at what time did they finish it, what were the assets that were created as part of a task. In a sense, the entire job progress is accessible using a fairly visual graphical environment. Time management is critical to ensuring jobs are completed on time. Next generation solutions like Zoom have an interface for automatically generating timesheets with the ability to zero on to a specific user and be able to see the activity, see how much time has been spent on working with specific digital assets in a particular project. Using this particular report, project manager can get a sense for who are the busiest users and who right now are not loaded, and use that for managing their resources in a more appropriate manner. Needless to say, end client satisfaction is critical for any creative organization. So we turn to how next generation workflow technology can help improve end client satisfaction. With traditional workflow, emailing proofs, sending final PDFs to end client late in the cycle is the norm. The problem with that approach is feedback from end client might arrive too late in the cycle to be meaningful. Further, multiple stakeholders are involved between the creative team and the end client, leading to lost in translation syndrome, which means there are just too many layers. By the time the end client sends the feedback to the creative team, the message could be diluted. So we look at how next generation workflow technologies can make the creative process flow more seamlessly. By bringing the end client into the production process earlier, feedback can be accelerated. By direct participation of the end client via visual markups on the creative assets that are being generated, by client's ability to see if the artwork is evolving in the right direction by using visual compare tools. Now, in order to demonstrate all of this, let's turn to a demo. Next generation workflow systems like Zoom provide end clients with a web-based interface to log in to see all the approvals that they need to make, to visually see all the assets that are part of a review task. They can look at the job details, they can look at the version history of the assets for their consideration, and when they are ready, they can click on an individual asset and go to an annotation editor. So for instance, the Photoshop document was opened in the web browser without any need for the client knowing how to use Adobe Photoshop. Using this editor, the end client can collaborate with the account services person in visually annotating and marking up the document. The account service person can see in real time the changes that the client is suggesting. From this interface, the end client can look through the various history of the annotations that they've been making or the account managers have been making on their behalf. For example, they can look at a particular date range and see the annotations that were made within a time period. If the client wanted to look at the annotations that they made for an older version from this interface, the entire history of annotation is accessible. Once the client is done performing a review, they can approve or reject individual assets, and once they have finished looking at all the assets, Zoom will automatically prompt them for approving or rejecting the entire task. If the task is rejected, then the workflow might iterate. Zoom can have a sub-workflow be launched in response to a rejection event. Systems like Zoom provide a sophisticated visual comparison tool that allows the account services, project managers, and even end clients to see if the artwork is evolving in the right direction. For instance, they can take versions of the artwork, go into a compare window, click on highlight differences, and quickly see the pixels that change across two revisions. This really helps the client and the marketing team figure out if the artwork is evolving as they expect it to. Operational efficiency is defined as the ability of a creative organization to deliver projects to client in the most cost-effective manner possible while ensuring high quality. Now, in order to increase operational efficiency, creative organizations need to minimize overheads by best utilization of existing technology infrastructure that they have and the workforce to manage it. With traditional asset management solution, the operational overheads tend to be high because number one, storage management costs are higher since the architecture depends on a network share as well as a SQL database to manage assets. Security model tends to be more complex with disparate security zones to administer because they transmit entire files back and forth. The network bandwidth cost tends to be much higher with traditional asset management solution. Finally, since they do not provide built-in workflow, versioning, you end up integrating with third-party applications, further increasing the cost of managing a end-to-end creative workflow solution with traditional DAM. Now, in contrast, next generation asset management solution have a much lower operational cost because A, they provide a built-in revision control database that reduces the need for multiple storage silos in the organization. They are optimized for storing large amount of data that reduces the need for installing and deploying multiple servers and the cost of managing multiple servers. They provide delta compression, which reduces the amount of storage needed by multiple versions of digital asset, thereby reducing the storage cost further. The next generation asset management solution provide a single security model across all the various backend functionality. And they are an integrated solution. They integrate workflow, versioning, and asset management into one umbrella, thereby reducing the cost of integration. So next we turn to how the architecture looks like for a traditional DAM versus next generation DAM and how that architecture helps lower the operational cost. With the traditional DAM, you end up with a split personality disorder with two different storage models to manage. The actual metadata is stored in a SQL relational database, while the assets themselves continue to reside on a network file share. And this split personality leads to all sorts of operational overheads that we talked about in the previous slide. Further, if you want to have workflow project management, you end up integrating with third-party applications, which increase your operational overhead. In contrast, the next generation asset management solution have a simplified architecture with a Rev database for storing all the metadata, all the assets, with versioning, project management, workflow, and asset management features tightly integrated into one package. So far, we have looked at the challenges that the creative organizations face today and how next generation workflow DAM solutions are addressing those challenges. Now we take a look at what the future holds for the asset management industry. From our experience, we see increased focus on video assets, be it Flash, HTML5, or other video types. There is need for being able to visually annotate frames in a video and being able to flow that into the creative process. We also see need for image recognition technology, which would allow video clips to be located based on a zone in a video frame. We see a lot of requirements coming out in the future for supporting compound assets. These could be 3D models, CAD files, 360-degree views of 2D assets, the ability to work with a compound asset that is composed of many disparate assets. Finally, the scaling requirements are going to explode. Today, the next generation asset management solutions can scale to hundreds of thousands of assets to perhaps millions of assets. But in the near future, we think there will be requirements for scaling to billions of assets, where the repositories would be distributed in a large global organization. There would be requirements to present a single virtual facade across a federation of repositories. And that brings us to the end of this webinar. What we have demonstrated so far is a modern integrated workflow coupled with versioning and asset management can streamline the creative processes, can cut down on operational cost in a creative organization, can provide quantifiable return on investment in a very short time. Thank you very much for being here with us, and next we will take up any questions that you might have.